This is Popping the Bubble with hosts Sandra Ponce de Leon and Pete A. Turner.
Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Wang. I am co-founder of SheWorx, the global collective of ambitious female entrepreneurs redefining leadership, and we are on Popping the Bubble.
Hey, Lisa. Awesome intro.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks for joining us. It's so great to have you. You have such an impressive background. You are a 4-time national champion gymnast and inductee into the U.S. Hall of Fame. And now you're the CEO of SheWorx. But before we get into that, would love to just kind of hear a little bit about your background in gymnastics and how that got you to where you are today.
Yeah, my background in gymnastics, I consider that my first career. And it was a really arduous journey, really, because I started it when I was 9 years old. I absolutely loved the energy of gymnastics and the artistry. And it really taught me how to prioritize what was most important, how to structure my goals, and how to figure out how to not let little things distract me. And part of gymnastics that's actually a bit difficult is the structure in that it is a zero-sum game. And what that means is that there's only one gold medal, and no matter what, only one person can win. And so even with my teammates, there's this toxically kind of competitive environment that you grow up in as a little girl, where your teammates are also the ones who are a bit, the ones who want you to fall. Right. And so you learn to be cautious. You learn to care a little bit, I think, too much about what the judges, the coaches, the teammates, the world thinks about you. Because again, gymnastics is such a subjective sport. It's really, there's politics. It's up to the judges. There's scoring sheets. And there is a lot of judgment on appearance. And so growing up in this environment for 10 years really made me an extremely competitive person who was a perfectionist as well. And it wasn't until I retired from gymnastics that I made my first real girlfriend. And I remember I had gotten my job on Wall Street, and she was genuinely happy for me. And that was the first time I actually understood. I was like, wow, this is what a friend is, someone who's happy for you.
Yeah.
So regardless, I think gymnastics was an amazing experience that taught me the power of grit and perseverance, goal setting, prioritization, and I was very successful in it. I was 4-time national champion, inducted into U.S. Hall of Fame, Olympic level. And the thing is, though, I realized, once I left that success and happiness are not directly correlated. And so just because you achieve external things doesn't necessarily translate to you feeling enough or you feeling whole. And so after I retired, there was this whole process of finding another passion, finding something that fulfilled me after gymnastics and learning to become a version of myself where I'm internally happy first and not reliant on external achievement to feel like I'm good enough.
Right. Well, that's so interesting that you say that, because you went from gymnastics into a career on Wall Street, which is all about, rewards and money and, really things that aren't necessarily intrinsic to happiness. So what was that experience like?
Yeah. So after I finished gymnastics, I went to Yale for college, and I wanted to find that academic passion. And the thing is, it's very hard after you've dedicated your life, your entire adolescence to one thing, to try and just, snap your fingers and find your passion the next day, your next one. And so I dabbled around a lot. I tried 8 different majors. I ended up majoring in American Studies with a focus on literature and performance arts, and had no intention of going into Wall Street or consulting, or I was adamant that that wasn't something I was going to do because I love words. I love crafting stories, and that's why I studied what I did. And I ended up right before I graduated receiving a fellowship to go to China to study the language and do some research. I was really interested in the real estate market in China and ended up doing economic research. And so the first job offer I got was actually from this hedge fund on Wall Street. And at that point, I was like, well, my dad's in finance. I know that this is a good job. Why not? So I took it, but it's one of those things like, when it fits or when it doesn't. And I knew right away that no matter how prestigious the job title was and the firm was, it wasn't a right fit. And, I stayed there for just about 2 years, but the kind of watershed moment was when my boss called me into his office one day and he said, "Lisa, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you?" And so I had this flash moment. I was like completely unexpected. And I said, 6. And he looked at me and he's like, "That is not good."
Wow.
And
that's amazing that he would even ask that. He must have sensed that you were unhappy.
Yeah. And I mean, I am one who will continue to be diligent as a perfectionist, but I think he could definitely sense that my heart wasn't in it. And I was lucky because I had a really understanding boss. And, he said, "If this isn't the thing for you, think about what it is that you want to do, because this is a golden opportunity for so many people." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's not the golden opportunity for me." So I went on a journey that weekend. He said, "Go home and come back to me on Monday and crystallize what you want," which is really hard to do. And I thought to myself, well, what do I love? Well, I love eating out. I love wine. I love reading. And so suddenly that weekend I decided, I'm going to be a sommelier. I was like, history, reading, all these, tasting good wine, having good food. So I went back on Monday and I said, "I'm going to work in wine. I'm going to become a sommelier." And they kind of laughed at me. But, I was able to convince them that it was something that I thought I cared about. And so I ended up working at the hedge fund by day. And then I got a part-time job at a wine store by night. And so I was working from 8 a.m. till midnight, 2-3 times a week, just going from the person handling the money to the person behind the counter doling out change. And so one of the things I realized while doing that was, I gained a lot of empathy because I was treated one way during the day. And I realized, kind of how badly people treat cashiers sometimes. They don't really make eye contact. And so that was an interesting experience. And
it was probably a humbling experience in some respect.
Definitely. And I kind of fast forward, I ended up realizing that wine was kind of just as much of a old boys club as finance was. It, a lot of the power and the judgment comes from men in France, and there's just not that much innovation happening. And so when I thought more about passion, I realized that it's not about a particular industry. And I think that's where people make the mistake. They think, I'm passionate about cars, I'm passionate about law, but I think it's passion about doing something and how doing something makes you feel. So for me, I realized I am passionate about being able to build something and have creative ownership. So whatever it is that I build, it's perhaps not as relevant because I want to learn those skills and go through that process. So I realized I want to be a founder because I want to be able to learn how to build a team. I want to learn how to exercise my leadership skills. And so I ended up, obviously kind of getting into the startup world. And I ended up going through something called Startup Institute, where I learned digital marketing. And I then started working at a mobile development design agency where I learned high-level UI UX. And then I built my first company called Foos in the food tech industry. And that went through FoodX, which is the world's #1 food innovation accelerator. And from that experience is when I was fundraising in Silicon Valley. And I realized just how much gender could impact my ability to succeed, because there are so many things that women go through, everything from being overlooked as the assistant. So I would go into meetings and my male co-founder would be the one that they would go over to shake hands with. And I would be, the secretary or, whatever it was. And
I've heard this story so many times.
Yeah. And, even the little dance that happens when investors ask you to talk about your company over dinner or drinks, and you have to figure out how you navigate this professionally, especially given the uneven power dynamic. And I realized that it's not about the big egregious stories you hear in the news. It's about the small paper cuts that happen to women every single day. And at that point, I wanted to find other female founders.
Hey, Lisa, I'm curious about something. And I want you to, I'm going to ask you a question that's going to go back in time a little bit. I want to ask you this question. So as a world-class athlete, I know one of my friends was an Olympic gold medalist. I've known people that were world-class in diving. There's different types of personalities that come through. And I'm sure you identify with this within your sport. There are people that want to do the dive exactly right so that they can get 10s. There are people that sort of get bored with that and they want to push things. So it used to be that a 3.5 was the dive that you did that was the highest difficulty, but still capable of being beautiful. Now, over time, they kept pushing that to a 4 and a 4.5. What kind of an athlete were you in terms of what's your makeup? Do you want to try to perfect it and get the 10? Are you more of a risk taker? How would you define your character on how you approach business and life with those kind of examples?
Great question. I would say that my personality has changed significantly from the time I was an athlete to now when I'm an entrepreneur and a business leader. Certainly, there are some traits that continue to exist. And the type of person I was when I was a gymnast was very much a perfectionist, extremely diligent, hard worker that would be the person that stays at the gym later, the person who, when all the other girls were sitting down, tired, talking on the sidelines, I was the one who wanted to keep working. And that made me a little isolated from the team, to be honest. And I think this also comes from my family's immigrant background. I have the hard work ethic instilled in me. I had seen how hard my dad had worked from, immigrating from China, speaking no English, selling the yellow pages for $40 a day to, initially feed the family and, working his way into a successful finance role where he's able to thrive and has achieved the American dream. And so when the going got tough, my parents just said, put your head down, work harder. And I think there are benefits as well as not so great things that come out of this sort of mindset, because I think it definitely stood out to the coaches very soon that I was not someone who was lazy and I didn't have a lazy bone in my body. The thing is, I think it made me try to do everything myself. It made me feel like I was never good enough, that I was never working hard enough, because perfection is impossible to achieve.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
It takes a lot of resources to chase perfection. And then you said a really important thing, and I love this, talking about wanting to do it all yourself, but you're going to go co-found things here in the future. And right now you have a co-founder. How does that maturation process happen? How do you flip from being this, every day, all day, early, late, all these things, outworking the problems, to someone who can collaborate with somebody else? I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like for you to transition into someone, who's a partner, who's more whimsical, who needs that artistic side to find the inspiration that goes in a direction that you would never even dream of because of yours. And it's not that your style isn't great, not that her style isn't great. It's just that you have these two styles and they work better together. You get that synergy. How do you cope with processing that and allowing someone else to contribute when what you've known, where your success is driven by this hard work regiment that you had?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, my co-founder, Yin Lin, is also an immigrant, and she also has this hard work ethic ingrained in her. So actually, that is where we are very much aligned. And anyone we bring onto the SheWorx team, we expect them to work hard. And I think that is probably not going to change. Both of us just have a bit of a hard time being lazy. So I think that's actually what works well for us. And
it's also noteworthy, just to add to that, I mean, the name of your company is SheWorx.
Yes. So you better get to work. Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest transition I actually think is from structure to ambiguity. So for me as a gymnast, and really for any athlete, there is a very clear structure to success. And it's, for me, it was win states, win regionals, win nationals, win Pan American Games, go to Worlds, Olympic Games. It's a very clear ladder that you have to climb. Whereas in startups, you have to define what success means to you, because you can choose a lifestyle business. You can choose, I want to have ambitions to get acquired. Whatever it is, it's up to the co-founders to figure that vision and then the strategy. And so most people just have a really hard time navigating ambiguity and making the hard decisions, because every decision you make can completely change the course of your company. And that was something that was a little bit, difficult for me to transition into. I think after gymnastics, I had a total rebellion period where I was just like, I don't want to listen to anybody tell me what to do, because I've listened to coaches and judges and parents and everyone tell me down to the pointed toe what I must do to earn a score. And suddenly I was like, the world is free and I get to define what I want. And I think that's why I was honestly drawn to entrepreneurship. And that was a big transition for me, where from structure to embracing liberation and freedom in choosing my path to success. And so I adopted this why not mentality, where I was like, why not try this? Why not try that? I think that is the sort of fearless quality where I just really believe that I know that I will be successful, and I'm confident in my ability to work hard and do the things that need to be done. And therefore, why not try everything in my power to find the thing that I am passionate about, which will make me happy? Because I know that if I do find that thing, I can just kind of drive that home. And I'm not afraid of not being able to put in the effort. So in terms of the co-founder conversation, where we are different is actually our communication styles. Yin is very direct. She makes the decisions very quickly. She tries out a lot of new ideas, whereas I come from a place where, I'm a writer. I love language. So I care a lot about the details of how is this going to be perceived? How is this word? How is this sentence? How are our values aligned with our customers? And so she thinks kind of big picture about some of the things that we're doing. And then I kind of think very much about the feelings and emotions of our community and how do we truly build connection. And I think when we bring those two together and we drive it forward, that's how we have that synergy.
That's amazing. I love your story. So let's talk a little bit about your passion. Have you found it?
I can finally say yes. It took
That's great.
9 years. And I mean, I would say I feel really lucky because I found one passion at a really young age. I had that sort of 9-year break. And I think all things happen in nines. It's really interesting. And then, now it's 9 years since I retired from gymnastics. And I just realized that I am passionate about making people feel connected, making people feel like they're not alone. And most importantly, helping women feel like they are good enough, because I struggled with this enoughness issue for my entire life. Even the term enoughness is something that I've learned in this past year, or I've kind of developed a concept behind it, because there's actually this metaphor that I'd love to share where it's imagine a bucket and a tree. So when in this empty bucket, you are the bucket and you're going through life and you're trying to fill this bucket with achievements and goals and money and fancy apartments and job titles, fill it and fill it and fill it. But no matter how much you fill it, you still don't feel truly fulfilled because you're still the empty bucket. And in contrast, there's the tree. And the tree, as it's growing, is not reaching for other trees. It knows that in order to grow taller and stronger, it has to focus on one thing, and that is its roots. Water, nutrients, connection to the earth, love, groundedness. And only when it grows tall and strong enough can it start bearing fruit for other people. And what these two things represent for me is the difference between trying to make yourself proud, which is the bucket, versus being proud of yourself, which is the tree. And I realized that I have been living my life entirely like this empty bucket, trying to make myself proud and fill it with external things. And yet I never thought it was enough. I was like, no matter what I do, no matter how good my resume is, I'm just like, I don't feel like I'm good enough when I walk into rooms. And it was only when I was able to model this out and create this distinction did I realize I was completely not sourcing my enoughness from inside. And I think this is what a lot of not just women, but men struggle with too. It's this intense focus on what other people think, on what society has told us is successful, and that will translate into us feeling like we're good enough. And so I am really passionate about helping other people realize they are good enough as they are, and that it's not about things that other people, give you. It's about what you can source, that power you source from inside yourself, and looking at your internal critic and, accepting yourself. And I think that is what I am able to do through SheWorx. Like, yes, we focus on female founders and closing the funding gap, but, at the heart of it, there's always going to be external challenges, and we will do whatever we can to break down those barriers, like the SheWorx 100 summits, like our SheWorx roundtables. But at the core of it, it's about community. And what community does is it gives you a support system that reflects the best parts of yourself. And that's why, altruism is a key value for us.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was a lot to think about and a lot to ponder. And it sounds like you've done a lot of work internally to get to that point. I mean, was there a particular moment when you had that clarity of mind, when you realized you were the empty bucket and that you weren't necessarily pursuing the right path, and that got you to this path of, finding collaborative space for women and helping other women in their endeavors and in their businesses?
Yeah, it was honestly surrounding myself with the right people. I think it was surrounding myself with people who are really self-aware, who had done a lot of self-work and probed and asked me the right questions. And funnily, I had this like community that I have of people in my life. Some of them didn't even come into my life. I've known them for less than a year, but some of the pointed questions that I've been asked have really forced me to look inside myself and wonder, like, where is this coming from, and like what I can actively do to overcome these things. And there's simple things like journaling, but there's also things like I did this exercise about a month ago where I was like, how do I make myself extremely uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. And I remember I wrote down a list of 5 people that would be the most uncomfortable people to call. And these are like ex-boyfriends, like past co-founder. And I just up and called them. Like, some I hadn't spoke to in years, mm-hmm. and they didn't leave off on the best note. And I was just like, my hands were trembling as I was calling, like dialing the number. But, a couple of them picked up, and I was able to, arrange a meeting. And it was a really, really nice kind of reunion, and we were able to clear the air. And I think it's just like tying up those loose ends. And, back then it was maybe bitter, but now it's just like there was so much gratitude. And it's just like things that are just harder in your head, and then when you actually do it in life, you're like, it wasn't that bad. It was just worse because I built it up. And so I think it's those sorts of exercises, almost like voluntary suffering. In the beginning, it feels like it's going to be really, really difficult, but when you do it, it just makes you stronger, and it builds up more empathy for other people. It builds up gratitude for the types of things you've endured and the people that you've met. And I think as you do that more, you start to build up this like confidence, this resilience, this belief that, you are who you are meant to be in this world.
Does it also impact your judgment? I mean, if you have this perception that this is going to be this negative experience, and it turns out it's tremendously rewarding, even if it's from a negative angle, does that make you kind of recalibrate your judgment and say, I need to be more open to things that I don't understand or things that I used to not be able to comprehend or deal with, because there's a lot of good things in those things? Does it change your perspective at all?
Yeah, I think I have definitely learned in the past couple years, especially since starting SheWorx and meeting so many incredible people, the power of empathy, of true empathy. And I think what that means is that you understand that everyone has their own reality, that no one is 100% right and no one is 100% wrong. And everyone sees the world through their own respective eyes. I mean, to truly understand the world, you have to hold space for other people so that you can, understand where they're coming from. And you may not agree, but at least you hear them. And I think that's even in the world that SheWorx operates in, which is, there is a lot of gender bias. And so even trying to, respond when that bias is against you, whether it's explicit, whether it's implicit, and not coming from a place of emotional reaction, because that's where things tense up. People react out of fear. They react out of anger or anxiety. And it's okay, no, let me take a step back, think about what he or she meant, maybe where they're coming from, and figure out how we can iron this out. Because I think the other thing is even just realizing that everyone's suffering in their own sort of way, or everyone's carrying around their old wounds that causes them to react negatively or positively to certain experiences. And a lot of times it's not you. And I think in that way, it makes me a lot more immune to just whatever comes my way, so long as I am grounded, right? So think of that tree. So it's I walk around, I'm you just meditate on. You're I am the tree, and
That's awesome.
I am grounded. And as long as I know my values, then I'm here to listen. I'm here to hold space, but I'm not going to be knocked over by the wind, like the empty bucket.
Mm-hmm.
When you sit in front of someone who's a venture capitalist, when you're advising the people that come and they work with you, clearly there's a gender bias. I mean, it goes both ways. It goes, humans have bias. That's what we do. But in this case, let's talk about gender bias. What do you do then? If you need to understand perspective, if you need to be that tree and hold space and not just be blown over by bluster, what is it that person needs? Because that's part of their life experience. This is a norm. And you're trying to say, this isn't a norm. You can hit it headlong, but a lot of times these things are done more subtly. What have you found? What do venture capitalists, angels, what do people who are trying to back your company, what are their concerns? What gets them around the bias that they feel?
Well, I mean, I think we first have to address the fact that venture capital is built, it's a masculine structure. Business was built by men. Women couldn't even apply for a credit card in 1970s, without their husband or father signing off. That was pretty recent. And everything that we are doing, the way we operate, women are still walking into a man's world. And so even the structure of pitch competitions that are ubiquitous, and it's a competitive energy. It is a masculine structure where, you go on as a founder and it's I get 3 to 5 minutes to talk about my company and be as boastful as I can, as big with my numbers. And that's right. Not facilitating any sort of meaningful relationship, which is why we created the SheWorx 100 Summit, which is focusing on closing the funding gap by collaborating, not competing. So, we're not preaching to anyone of you must change. We are just creating it. And we are creating a space at the summit where it is not your typical conference. You go in and the investors, men and women, are there for the entrepreneur. So you're at a table. Investors are not allowed to sit next to each other. They're sitting there. It's one investor, 5 female founders. It is a specific structure of breakout sessions where every woman has equal airtime. She shares a little bit about her company, what she does, but the majority of the time is focused on each woman sharing a particular challenge that she's going through in her company. And then everyone, investor, other female founders, pitch in with resources and ideas of how to help her. And suddenly the mission is to help rather than to judge. And that has resulted in over 25% of the women who come receiving follow-on investor meetings and subsequent investment. And even in our last SheWorx 100 summit in New York, it's only been about 3 weeks. And already a woman has pinged us and she said, I had such a hard time getting an investor before getting any meetings. Because I went to your summit, I was able to talk to this partner, this investor, and he is now our lead investor. And so now I'm getting term sheets in and I'm going to close my round in a couple more weeks. And it completely changed the tides for us because it gave us a structure where we could speak to the investors as humans and not as investors.
Yeah.
So I think it's on the one hand, just taking action and doing things that disrupt the typical dynamic, because the conversation, the awareness is out there now. And so the next things that people have to do are to take action. And two, I think the second thing is having hard conversations that I don't think people are having, because you'll go to panels and they'll be like, what do you think the challenges are for female founders? And it's everyone knows the challenges. We don't need to talk about the challenges anymore. We need to talk about what are you doing to facilitate those hard conversations? And it's not even the women. I mean, the women have to have that too, but what are the men doing amongst their other male VC friends to have the hard conversations of if they're going to lunch and one of the guys hey, are we being biased? And maybe we shouldn't just talk about whatever it is
sports
all day. Yeah. Yeah. Sports
I like
all day.
sports.
And but yeah, I think it's just, sure, that there are biases happening. We know that there's is it only 3% of companies with a female CEO get investment? Only 17% of companies with a female founder are venture backed. But what are you doing to facilitate those hard conversations and actively trying to combat your own biases? And no one can make someone more self-aware. That has to be something that someone personally decides to do. And I don't think that's going to be very easy to do. Obviously, we will do whatever we can to get more investment into female founders, because that is the only way things are going to change. But I think give it a little time. I think there's going to be an entirely new structure of funding. And they're already things are happening now, right? Crowdfunding is the only type of funding where women outperform men. And it's because you're also not buying into this clear VC structure where it's clear path to $1 billion. And that is the only thing that matters. Because then you don't get things like Juicero, right? The being funded, which is juicer with Wi-Fi, and why does a juicer need Wi-Fi? Why does it need all these parts that are engineered? So I think we're going to get to a place where there will be weight, even more weight given to impact, which is what I found a lot of women emphasize. It's more impact. They emphasize revenue, but it's ambition is in impact, whereas currently ambition is defined in a masculine structure, which is more about money and titles. So I'm excited to see the future of the funding landscape, which I think VC will diminish significantly over time.
Mm-hmm. You're doing such a huge part to promote the landscape for female entrepreneurship, especially with SheWorx. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about the upcoming event and other things that you've got on tap for the community.
The upcoming events that we have include the SheWorx 100 Summit in San Francisco, and that is on May 10th. And then we also have our SheWorx 100 Summit in London, which is on June 7th. And this is part of the 3-part series in New York, SF London, where we are bringing together about 600 female founders, over 100 investors from each of these local ecosystems. And it's our initiative to close the funding gap. And we wanted to hit New York, SF London to see the differences in these local ecosystems. And we're doing some really significant research around gender bias, around, the differences in these cities. And we just released our first actual Crunchbase list of female founders who are actively fundraising in New York from the summit. And this is our initiative to take action because we're tired of hearing investors say, we can't find women to invest in. And
right.
So we can be like, well, here you go.
Yeah, here they are.
Right.
Here they are in New York, here they are in San Francisco, here they are in London. And so, yeah, we focus on providing women with actionable skills, access to resources and investors, and we promote women who are building amazing things. And it's all around our 3 core values as SheWorx, which we call our AAA values. And those are ambition, action, and altruism. So ambition means dreaming big, not listening to the naysayers or the doubters, and just dreaming as big as you can. 2 is action. So not just dreaming, but taking action to execute. And number 3 is altruism. And that's the idea that as you become more successful, you recognize that you didn't get here alone. And it is your duty as you become more successful to give back to the women who helped you along the way to help make the pie bigger for everyone and empower the next generation of young entrepreneurs. So we are super excited for the future. We're excited to see the results of these summits and hear the success stories of women who are getting funded. And yeah, SheWorx is hosting events now in 7 global cities: New York, SF, London, LA, Tel Aviv, Singapore, and we just launched in Toronto. And we're excited to keep expanding. So if there are any women who are interested in starting chapters in their cities, I'd love to hear from them, and they can apply to start a chapter at SheWorx, SheWorx.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a great conversation, so many insights and lessons, and I can't wait for the event next week. I'm super excited to attend. And yeah, thank you for all that you do. And I'm definitely looking forward to it. I love your core values as well.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
You're really doing great work. And, if we could support you either in San Francisco or I'm down in LA, to let us know. We're glad to, this is a cause that we both believe in. And that's why we always are looking for females that are making a female difference. So I love it. And again, if we can help you out, just let us know.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. Bye.